Welcome to the France 24 debate. I'm Mark Owen with you for the next hour of discussion. And believe me, we have people here with opinions to keep you glued to your TV screens, we hope. Let's tell you what they might be talking about then. France is finished, said a British businessman. He later apologised, but essentially the sentiments were there and very much set in the ether. France is facing the wrath of Brussels over its deficit, and France is at odds with Germany over austerity versus growth. If you've been following French politics and the financial situation, you will be aware of all of this. But clearly, it's going to a bit of a head with France needing to hand in its budget to the EU and get that approved, awaiting the green light, of course. That's all happening in Luxembourg. The new finance minister, Emmanuel Macron, has unveiled something of a master plan, I suppose. Maybe that's an exaggeration, to try to reboot the French economy. Will it be enough, though, to combat problems such as record unemployment? There's the man himself who's tasked with sorting this out. A budget target that they have no hope of achieving. That, of course, the 3% by 2015, which the EU demands. And this, of course, while more and more French talent is deciding to up sticks, leave the country and set up abroad. London benefits quite a lot. Remember David Cameron saying he'd roll out the red carpet to anybody who wants to leave France and bring their money with them. Well, we'll see what our guests have to say about the situation, France and its fiscal discrepancies. We'll give it that title, but this could cover many issues regarding the whole gamut of public spending. Let's introduce you to our guests here to discuss this, this and many other issues, starting with no order of preference, because all the guests here are equal. And they get equal say too. Marcus Kerber is joining us from Berlin, from the Technical University there. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Pleasure to see you. On the other side of our studio, we have representing the French Socialist Party, Philippe Cordery.
Hello.
Good to see you, sir.
Hello.
Philippe speaks English better than I do, but you're actually French, aren't you?
I'm half French, half English.
Well, there you go. There's always an explanation behind these things, you know. I'm 100% from Liverpool. Let's bring in our third guest, who is a gentleman called Jean-Paul Betbez. Jean-Paul, I'm confused about your stance on this. Where do you stand? Are you pro-growth, pro-austerity? Where do you feel?
I am pro-Europe.
Good man. Okay, I think that explains quite a lot of issues there. We have another guest who's going to join us very shortly. We'll progress, though, with issues to get things going here and take a listen to what Emmanuel Macron had to say about the economy and the clues that he gave people a little earlier about what he's got installed to try to reboot France and French finance.
Utiliser improprement.
Please anyone in particular, or because we've been told to do so. The economic situation which we're currently facing calls for reforms. We have a real need to improve our growth potential and modernize our economy for France.
Well, there you go. Pretty clear. We're joined, as if by magic, by our fourth guest here in the studio, Daniela Schwarzer from the Europe programme at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Good to see you.
Good evening.
And there are no penalties for being late, because I'm sure it wasn't your fault.
No, it was the airplane and the taxi. So,
if in doubt, blame the traffic. That's what I say in Paris.
Exactly.
Why don't I give you the first, the first say, if you like, the situation here in France. We've heard about Emmanuel Macron wanting to introduce things like Sunday trading to try to reboot the French economy. That could be one thing, but clearly many more things need to happen, don't they?
Yes. Well, I think from the German perspective, many things have to happen in France. It is probably some degree of structural and labor market reform. I think it's also a rethink which goes to a fundamental way to the political system, the selection of elites, the educational system. There are many things in France which may need to be changed after so many decades. Having said that, there are obvious strengths in the French economy, which are probably at this point in time too little seen. France has been a leader in many high-tech industries for a while from a German perspective, there is a lack of a tissue of small and medium-sized enterprises. There are French market leaders, and I think the debate in Germany very often ignores these strengths as well. Okay, so France has strengths. Philippe is your man. I'll say is your man because he's in your party. Is your man the man with the plan to sort it all out?
I think the team is the team to sort it out, and that's what we've been trying to do for 2 years. And I'm not here to do any French bashing, to be honest. It's not a question of France versus Germany or France versus Europe. It's a question of what kind of Europe do we want? Do we want growth, or do we want to continue with austerity? The 10 years of austerity that we've had in Europe has led us to the situation we are now, which is almost deflation. And that's, I mean, we have to take that into consideration for the economic plan that we need for this continent. And today we need growth, we need investments on the European level, we need reforms, and that's what we've been doing in France. And to have, to reduce the spendings, we're reducing spendings every year in the budget, to create growth by investments on France and on the European level, and at the same time to keep social justice, because we cannot, I mean, have a pure austerity program. If not, I mean, we know what the consequences are. They're social, they're political, with the extreme rights as a booming. So we need to balance, and we need to do it at a rhythm. And that's what also Brussels, in inverted commas, has to understand. So basically the European Commission.
I love the inverted commas about Brussels. Jean-Paul, let me bring you in as the pro-Europe guest.
We are all,
we're all pro-Europe.
In this, you know, in this panel, we are all in favor of Europe, as hopefully. And the story is very tricky. Of course, the situation for France is tricky, but the global situation for Europe is not so easy, because the question, of course, of austerity is a word, but the question is modernity. And we really have to modernize our economies. And as far as France is concerned, to modernize our social relationship. I think that if we have to begin with something, it's, of course, maybe, you know, working a bit more or something like that, yes, but to begin to discuss within companies and within, you know, the enterprises, without, you know, going immediately to the streets and to demonstration. We really have to understand that this is a big change for all of us, and it has to be organized and discussed beforehand. Otherwise, we will have more and more difficulties. And we are in the situation where, you know, there are discussions now with what we call the MEDEF in France, with the unions, to really try to change something which is lasting for 50 years.
Change isn't something that comes easy to France, though, is it?
No, we are trying to change, and we change dramatically. You know, what happened with this kind of crisis happen every 50 or 60 years. So please enjoy it, okay? It's a huge crisis. Okay, it's a huge crisis from the global perspective, from modernity or something like that. And of course, we were a bit caught by surprise. Okay, and in being caught by surprise, we had not all the leeways and all the room of maneuvers that the US had, and this is why we are bogged down in difficulties, because in the process of the European Union, this kind of story was not, you know, prepared. We were not prepared for it.
I think it's fair to say nobody saw the crisis coming, but the people who did best out of it and maybe suffered less were people in Germany, Marcus. Why was that?
Well, I don't think that Germany is a reference country, because what we have done in Germany, what we have achieved, is a specifically German way of solving reforms. We are a consensus country, and the man who has been very successful in re-engineering the social system, Gerhard Schröder, has been voted out of office. So he has been sacrificed. Let's get that straight. I rejoice to take part in that debate, because I have to counter-attack on ideological or political fallacies which you have articulated. You, a Frenchman, talking in impeccable English with a British accent. This is a European moment in one way or another. And I would like, first of all, to bring back let's say, a little bit more of common sense and pragmatism to the debate by, pragmatism, common sense, growth and austerity are not, have not to be seen in an antagonistic way. Of course, it's easier, it's far smoother to reorganize public finance and to readjust public finance in times of growth. France has never done. Right-wing regimes or left-wing regimes, and has been excellent. I still remember Mr. Sarkozy, to whom I'm fundamentally opposed in any aspect, who went to the ECOFIN in 2007 and explained the ECOFIN that France would have to need some exceptional more time because they want to have a big public investment plan. So France is now in a very desperate situation, and it is more at stake than just France and France reform. It is the credibility of the Eurozone. And France has a great responsibility. And this is the specific aspect of the French political system. Whereas France has an enormous, if not historic, responsibility. The French Prime Minister goes to Germany, reminding the Germans of their responsibility and asking the Germans to do more deficit spending. And the focus we have to put on that debate is on this exceptional role. Can France go on teaching other nations lessons, whereas she performs so poorly? And I think the first time in the European history, we have to watch a totally different approach of discussions in the European club. There are other countries like Spain, after a period of strong austerity, which is performing not so badly. It's coming out of recession. Why? Because they have conducted a policy of blood, toil, tears and sweat. And the question is there anybody in the political class in France who is going to play the role of Winston Churchill in readjustment or in fiscal readjustment, having the guts to explain the French that there is no alternative to fiscal adjustment?
France doesn't need a Winston Churchill. France needs a François Hollande, and that's what we have. And it's exactly the same as Gerhard Schröder. You mentioned Gerhard Schröder. It took Germany 10 years to reform. And during those 10 years, the deficits went well over the 3%. And there was a negotiation with Brussels, because you cannot reform a country within a year or 2 years. It takes time. You mentioned also the Sarkozy years. During the Sarkozy years, I mean, he was going to negotiate in Brussels, at the same time reducing taxes for the richer and increasing the debt, which is completely different to what we're doing today, which is reforming the country, reducing the deficits, having policies for the competitiveness also of our enterprises, because we have a serious competitiveness problem in our country, but we're addressing it. And if we want those reforms to succeed, we need time, and we cannot go faster than what the reforms need. If not, we will have social unrest, and we'll have the National Front in government at the next election, and that's not what we want today.
Let me just remind people who are watching they can take part. You can take part via Twitter, of course. Tweet to us with France 24 debate. We will put your tweets on screen and get the panel here to comment on them. Proof of that, Jim Hassett has tweeted in saying the Greeks get shafted, is the word he's used, while bigger countries like France and Spain get to make their own rules on bank debt and now on budgets. Daniela, would you say that that is fair? Do we have like a two-tier Europe system, which of course makes people question why they have a Eurozone at all?
Well, I guess there are two risks at the moment. One is the division of Europe into crisis countries and non-crisis countries. And I know that from the perspective of crisis countries, it looks like over the last 4 years, it is the others who set the rules. That is partially true, but there were reasons why this was so, because there was a consensus at some point in the euro area in 2010 that financial aid could only be given if there is something in return, and that is conditionality in terms of fiscal adjustment and structural reforms. But it is true that the adjustment path in the countries was more painful than was initially expected. So it is very clear that there is a perception, and we have to take this seriously, in the crisis countries that policies were imposed on them, the costs of which had not been correctly been assessed. Now, we are in a situation where we actually face a risk of political and social stability in some member states, and that is why the discussion now has a new sense of urgency. And even though one may agree that the fundamental path of combining fiscal adjustment and structural reforms was right, we have to look at the situation today and ask ourselves whether this is politically and socially still sustainable. The other risk I see, and that was maybe also in that quote, is that there is a perception that Europe is run by the large countries and not by the small countries. There is always this danger that when rules are implemented, that the larger countries have a stronger say. And there has been one precedent, and that was in the early 2000 years when the Stability and Growth Pact was actually reformed. That was clearly driven by Germany and France together. So since then, there is this prejudice that this can actually happen. I think the moment now is really a crucial one to show that Europe has come up with a better set of rules and governance mechanisms, and that they are applied to all countries in the same way. This makes it so difficult from the French perspective, because there's less hope than more than 10 years back, that because it is a large country, there will be an exception to the rule.
Go ahead, Philip.
No, we don't want an exception to the rule. We want the rules to sort of be looked at in their globality. And the treaty says very clearly that the 3% budgetary deficit rule is unless exceptional circumstances. And up to now, the definition of exceptional circumstances has been recession. So we're not quite in recession yet, but to have zero inflation at the same time as we have zero growth, that should be considered as exceptional circumstances, and you cannot, with a deflation, in deflation, have the same income as you do in a growth time. So, I mean, we just want, to use all the flexibilities of the treaties, but not to change the rules themselves.
You know, this is a discourse which France is holding for many, many years, and is continuing to pronounce today, and that's why I think. I don't believe you, because France is no longer credible in with that discourse. What is at stake what is at stake is just more France. It is the credibility of fiscal adjustment in the Eurozone. And as you pointed out quite clearly, how can we impose very strict austerity measures to countries like Spain, comparable at least to France, which are applied with under circumstances which are severe for the Andalusian people, with unemployment enormous. No, it pays off. It pays off. Apparently, it pays off. Spain is back again, and there is growth in Spain, more than 2%. So this is the wisdom of fiscal adjustment policy. The sooner a country gets successfully out of a fiscal adjustment phase, the sooner it gets out of recession. And France is going to play the role of a free rider in the European Monetary Union, having all the advantages of the euro and not paying tribute to the fiscal discipline roots.
Jean-Paul.
I think that what you say is not completely serious, technically speaking. You know, what is important is what we call potential growth. And what happens to all countries in Europe is that potential growth is diminished. And if we have austerity, and if we do not have a policy of modernity to increase potential growth, we will all have difficulties, all have problems. You know, what happened with Spain is better now, but they have lost 10% or 15% of potential growth. Yes. The same was Greece. Mm-hmm. And Greece is over-indebted still. Okay, and there is no solution now for Greece, and austerity is not per se a solution. And this is a very important element. You know, what is important is the sustainability of Europe as a whole. You know, in this kind of very, very painful
and the Eurozone, I suppose.
The Eurozone.
Is it sustainable? Do you think or has it become an adventure?
You know,
sorry for taking you.
Go ahead.
It is always an adventure. Europe is an adventure. The US was supposed to be an adventure. Every country is a country, and this is an adventure. But this adventure is very important for us.
We need to pause.
Succeed.
We need to pause. What I like about this program is that you talk and I get paid, which is brilliant. We are having a short break. After that, this debate resumes. Please stay with us and send your tweets. We need your help.